everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Guns, brought to you by Patriot Patch Company, VZ Grips, MAF Corporation, and FFL Payments. This show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Matthew Larosiere, and I'm joined again by my rat friend, Mr. Ivan.
It's me. I'm coming to you live from the inside of a Covenant cruiser.
Yeah, he's in the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Yeah, I've got a major modern space gun.
Whoa, that looks like it might fold.
Yeah, that's true.
Whoa, that's
all the guns in the future do that.
Yeah, guns in the future all have articulable thumbs. I heard
that's real.
That is real. But so yeah, guys, this is going to be a bit of a special episode because at the end of it, we'll be doing This Year in Guns. We're going to give you a basic rundown of all of the earth-shattering, world-ending things that happened almost every day, according to most of the clickbait creators. And so we'll have a tally of all of those things that actually totally happened. So, but yeah, that will be at the end. Until then, it's your regularly scheduled programming. And speaking of our regularly scheduled programming, vzgrips.com. VZ Grips is a longtime supporter of the show, and they're very nice and handsome. And you can use promotional code ThisWeek15, that's THISWEEK15, to get yourself a good grip on your life. You know, get it under control. You can check out their clearance sections, their pistol grips, all of the different guns. This is every single gun that's ever been made. They have a grip for. So yeah, check it out. vzgrips.com. The grips are grippy and they're good for you. And again, Florida company. Good business. Let's get right into our first story. This is a notable one right here. A very talented horse breeder has died. He has left us, and he was one that was very relevant to our community.
Oh no. He's talking about Mr. Glock Come In.
Yes, he is. He will be remembered by the gallons of Glock milk that was left behind from the big black Glock.
This is sad.
This is sad. But yeah, no, it is Gaston Glock, inventor of the namesake pistol and curtain rod man, dies at 94. He leaves behind his 17-year-old wife, and just kidding.
Sure, she is old enough to be his grandchild, but not 17, not great grandchild.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it's and of course this CNN business article gives like, it's weird because it's CNN right through, like, oh, this guy was very interesting in the business sense, and also, did you know there were mass shoots that did with the Glock? Yeah, and also there were raps about it.
Well, they did a big rap song about the Glock.
Along with being the weapon of choice for many law enforcement officials, the Glock is a staple in many hip hop songs. Tupac referenced grabbing a Glock in his famous song "Hit 'Em Up," and the Wu-Tang Clan titled one of their songs "The Glock."
I guess it's kind of a frequent theme that you see throughout American, I don't know if it's necessarily gun culture is the right word, but American history at large, where there'll be guns that are sort of favored by the cops, and then criminal elements favor them because they're the cop favored gun. And then I guess you sort of see that same thing with, it happens with military guns, right? The thing the military is using invariably gets a little cheaper, a little more on shelves, either because the military things, the aspect is cool and people want to buy it, or just because there's, you know, extra ones floating around, whichever the case may be. But Glock certainly did, you know, seize that part of the market, and it seems like a lot of it was by mistake, because he didn't set out to design a gun that all law enforcement would be using, and he didn't set out to design a gun that was going to, you know, sort of dominate the playing field in such a way that multiple other companies' entire handgun mainstay line are just Glock clones. You can make an entire company off of just knocking off the gun that he designed in the 80s. And then, you know, Glock itself is sort of a titan of the firearms world. Isn't it like half of all the firearms, half of all the handguns sold in the US are Glocks? It's some ridiculously large percentage.
I think it's, yeah, but you have to adjust it to very, you know, specific 9mm stuff.
Right, but it's a massive portion of the number of handguns, probably more so than any other one gun company has, especially for what's effectively one model line that's never changed, and the fact that that's the only gun they've ever made, right? So it's not like, oh, they sell a lot of pistols, but they make other stuff too. It's just pistols. That's it. They've just made the same gun over and over. They'll pretend that it's like massively tweaked, but like the most innovative thing they've ever done was like, we made it a little skinnier.
Yeah, we made it a little skinnier. We put finger grooves on. We put the finger grooves off. We put the finger grooves back on.
Oh, stay tuned for next time. We'll put fish scales on the slide. But yeah, we'll collect that one.
So I think also this Glock and his first wife Helga married in 1962 and divorced in 2011, according to a lawsuit filed by Helga. The lawsuit said they had 3 children: Brigitte, Gaston Jr., and Robert. The more than 350-page suit documented the acrimony between the two, comparing the inventors to Shakespeare's King Lear. So that's something. But just definitely an interesting cat. But yeah, no, he was 94 years old, so that does happen. So, let us move on. I can make one comment. What will happen to the company now that their designer is gone?
Because see, it's because of the things I just mentioned, it's even worse. Because like even with traditional gun companies, right? They don't design anything. Right. People like to point to SIG, like, oh, SIG is cutting edge innovation. The military is adopting all their guns. The 320 is just like the worst possible striker fire conversion of a gun that was already designed, and it was designed in a country by the good side of SIG that actually makes decent stuff when it was hammer fired. Right. Like it's not new. It's just worse in all of the ways possible. And like, even the SIG Spear, right? At the end of the day, it's also AR-15 base, right? That it's a headache for me that
the 320 is to the SIG hammer fired handgun what the 416 is to the AR.
it's about right, where it's like of course I don't know that they were necessarily trying to fix a problem with the 320, but like the 416 was set up to fix a problem that they didn't even fully understand. Of course, right. Once you bring up SIG and HK, there was a story I saw this week where there's a German police department that had bought like 500 MCXs because they were like, oh, they're cheaper than 416s. And they had like 70 of them break in the first year. And then they
I wonder why these are cheaper.
They're selling all of them and buying 416s. And I'm just sitting here like, oh my God. And the US makes it incredibly difficult for gun companies here to export good, of course, because all of the guns that the German police here were using were semi-automatic only. And the article was in German. It kept calling them semi-automatic assault rifles, and I kept saying, "Oh my God!" I guess just the you guys language created the word, and then it goes backwards, and it's a combination of German and language barrier, right? Yeah. But it was interesting to see that they bought the SIGs and then dumped them for the 416s, and I'm sitting here thinking, the 416s were about double the price. And I'm sitting there wondering, like, if the U.S. government didn't make it impossible, they could be buying PSA ARs and probably be better off in the end. Literally. For how cheap they are and how cheap spares should be.
And how fairly robust they are for the amount of use that.
Right. Because German cop is going to, like, it's a German anti-terrorism thing, so it's not even like they're going to be using these very frequently at all.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they'll see hundreds of rounds every year, just like the average PSA AR-15.
And then it's funny because the MCX is broke after that, which is
MCXs have a habit of breaking.
That's true,
for like no reason. But
SIG is just misunderstood.
That's right. Yeah, no, we just don't have a high enough IQ to understand.
The show is unsponsored by SIG. Yeah. We hate them.
We hate them. But anyway, speaking of things that happen for no reason, you know what I hate? When the credit card companies and evil banks charge you too much money for no freaking reason, just because you're a gun business. But there's a solution. FFL Payment Solutions. This is fflpaymentprocessing.com. Guys, this was started by FFLs for FFLs. They're going to give you extremely good rates, and it's a company that you are never going to have to deal with them cutting you off because they found out you're selling guns. You say goodbye to ringing up handguns as wrenches or whatever it is you were doing to keep processing through your, ordinary bank. Contact fflpaymentprocessing.com. Get rates. It's free. And the best thing is they will sit there and tell you exactly what you're paying. They're going to cut through all the BS, tell you what you're paying right now, what you'll be paying with FFL payments. There's no reason not to. And if you, you got a local shop that you go to, you can save them a lot of money, most likely, by showing them to fflpaymentprocessing.com. And this isn't a normal ad read. This is my best friend that started the company, and I'm involved in it too. So it's not just this isn't just like a regular ad read. This is something that, it's not like, oh, I totally play Raid Shadow Legends. No, I help write the legal documents.
I actually do play Raid Shadow Legends.
No one plays that shit.
No one does. How is that possible? South America exists, I guess.
Okay, yeah. Have you ever played it?
No, I like for the longest time I thought it was a piss take on actual mobile games.
Yeah,
it was like everybody was making fun of it, and then eventually come to find out like once the ads matured and you got actual ads for the game as a pre-roll, and then you got them in as a mid-roll on the video, and then you got them as the included ad on the actual content. I was like, oh wait, this isn't a joke, is it? This is real. I thought the same thing. I thought it was I follow along the same thing because it's such an extreme version of this is not, of the sleight of hand, right? Where they show this gameplay that looks like a third person action game, but for a fact it's an idle game, like idle clicker pay to win thing. Right. Or the new ones, like it's got the barrels rolling at the person. The person has to shoot the barrels to get the better gun, except they're really bad at the game. So you're supposed to sit there and think like, oh, I could shoot a barrel better than that. I could do that 100%. And then I've also seen them do the the key puzzle, right, where it's like, oh, I'm pulling the pins out in the wrong order and it is causing the princess to drown. It's so stupid. I am somebody who has played some stupid games, on the phone. I have, well, not very long, but I played and enjoyed the Hatsune Miku Idle Tap game. And I looked at Raid Shadow Legends and I'm like, that's boring. I'm not doing that. So, anyway, that was a fun aside. Sorry about that. Despite all that, what with playing like stupid video games that only a moron would enjoy, it is fascinating that Raid Shadow Legends being as bad as it is, it's 10 times better than War Thunder. Get dumped on, nerds. Go to the Cope section and tell us why I should spend 89 hours grinding through the French tree. Everybody go and tell us how this game that's got you Stockholm Syndrome is actually really good. It's just misunderstood. He means well. Once you get to tier 10 and you can start using tanks from the 1970s, it's a lot of fun and you only have to pay $30 after every game to repair the tank. Wow. It's fun to send all your money to Russia. But anyway, so let's talk about Bruen response laws. Those were a big theme this year. Yep. And there was a big happen this week. A judge has blocked California's Bruen response law, which banned open carry in most public places. The manner in which it was blocked was super interesting because they had oral arguments on it. And the judge said that he was going to issue a quick response. Like he's heard enough. He's going to issue a quick response. And based on the way oral arguments went, it was pretty awful for the state. The judge asked them if they had any data about concealed carry permit holders being are they an elevated danger? Because the state of California is trying to point to their analogous laws, as Bruen tells them to, and they're pointing to laws where it's like we can disarm dangerous people. And the judge is like, can you show that concealed carry permit holders are more dangerous than average citizens? And the state of California straight up refused to answer the question, changing the subject, fumbling with their notes, not just pretending they didn't hear it. It was bad. And so the judge at the end of the argument said that he'd issue his order, his decision quickly. And I think it was 4 or 5 hours. He issued a scathing opinion that was like, hey, state of California, you didn't even try to make this comport with Bruen. You fucked up big time. And now you're in trouble for it. He said that
this was a sweeping, repugnant to the Second Amendment, and openly defiant of the Supreme Court.
Which is not something you want to have said about the big law that you went and did.
Yeah, it's
and of course the reactions from
it's concealed carry, of course.
Right.
I don't know why the headline said open carry, and I read it like a stupid robot.
It's kind of silly the way the state of California and its officers reacted. You had Gavin Newsom saying that, well, thanks to this judge's opinion, people in California can now carry in zoos, libraries, businesses in public, despite the fact that that was always permitted, and that this law that was passed would have made it so after the first of the year, whatever effective date it would have had, is when that would have happened. Like, it had always been that way. It had been that way the entire time Newsom was governor of that awful shithole. Yeah,
no, it's almost as if when you're out around adults, some adults take responsibility for their safety and do things to
wild.
Guard against eventualities. It's kind of like when you're out on the road, if you look at other vehicles, some of them, they might be wearing seatbelts. They're not me. I have a Corvair.
Not me.
Yeah.
Not me. The seatbelt makes it hard for me to reach over and grab my beer, but
yeah. But yeah, so it's interesting thing that the book is starting to turn on the states here. Fascinatingly, in the Fresno Bee, there was an opinion piece that came out this week where this person who's like a no guns, he's a no guns, assault weapon hating liberal, and he was like reacting to this law and the case, and he's like, straight up, this is obviously unconstitutional.
Right. There's a phenomenon of the liberal gun owner, right, where they'll consistently vote against their own better interests on the gun owning side, right, either because they believe in gun control laws despite being gun owning, which is a head scratcher, or because they believe more strongly in another issue, which is understandable, because I'm that way for guns, where I will excuse people's bad views on other stuff if they've got good views on guns, which is just like the evil plague that is American politics in current year. But there's this sort of like happening where generally these people will be supportive of assault weapons bans and magazine bans and banning the sort of scary stuff, the hot button issues, they'll side with the generally progressive viewpoint on. But contrary to even 20 years ago, there's a lot of liberals that are like in favor of people owning handguns today, where they'll come right out and say like, oh yeah, owning handguns is fine. And I think you even had Kamala Harris and Joe Biden straight up say like, oh, nobody wants to take your, it used to be nobody wants to take your shotgun for hunting. But these days the Overton windows shifted so much, they'll say, well, nobody wants to take your pistol. And of course it's a lie, right? Because then they'll go and do stuff like Illinois did, where it's like they ban pistols that have a threaded barrel, and then they won't define which end of the barrel being threaded is what's violative of the law. Yeah. And then they're going to have the cutoff for the registration take place before they're going to clarify which end of the barrel being threaded is violative of the law. So who knows?
Right. So this is interesting here. That's what the guy says. So carrying all of his anti-gun biases and beliefs, he was surprised by his reaction to the Bee reporter Jim Guy's recent story about a new state law that tightens restrictions on concealed carry permits. This is the law that was struck down, right? Or blocked. Specifically, the part where permit holders would be prohibited from carrying handguns into sensitive places, including parks, banks, school grounds, churches, bars, liquor stores, and the vast majority of restaurants and supermarkets. What? My liberal brain, the same one packed with gun control biases, slammed the brakes so hard it left mental skid marks. The immediate thought, there's no way that's constitutional. Followed shortly by, why are policymakers wasting our time by passing laws that will surely get struck down in court?
I'm still...
Salient point, I guess.
I'm still tinfoil hat enough to believe that it's probably 3D chess, 4D chess that the anti-gunners are playing, where they'll pass laws that they can market as sounding good, right? Because Newsom's been marketing bad gun laws effectively to morons for a long time now.
Right.
We'll say like, oh, this is common sense, right? And he's got half the people who are aware of this straight up believing that this is the first time somebody in California can carry a gun in public. Meanwhile, it's always been that way. The whole time he's been governor, it's been this way. It's nothing.
Well, the whole
changed.
time he's been governor, it's been a lot harder to get a permit, to be fair.
That's also true. But it's just like it's wildly silly that goes on. And so I suspect that part of this is them passing stuff that they know will get struck down, because come election time, they'll be able to say, look, evil Donald Trump loving judges make this happen bad. Vote for me. I make not happen bad.
Right, but that doesn't work if you push so hard on the edge that progressives start saying, what are you doing?
Right.
Like then suddenly you lose all credibility. When
there's certainly an Overton window there, and I think carry of handguns is probably not the direction that they want to push in, because that window has shifted so far since the last 20 years.
Yeah, hell, the last 10 years. The thing is that gun control is such a muddy, weird, gray topic to the average, low information individual, like you, that that you have to trust, right? If you believe in gun control, if you're one of those 80% of people that is just in the middle, if you're gonna buy that a law is, designed to have some positive effect, you don't have much to go on aside from the faithfulness of who's purporting it.
Right.
And so if you push that hard, there's just no coming back from it. If you lose the faith of a mod, right, there's no possible way to come back from it, because to a mod, there's no distinction in their brain, right? There's very little distinction between this shape of gun is bad and you can't carry your gun here, right? Because they're all and all gun control that can actually pass is moving along the margin. Mm-hmm. And so if you push the wrong margin so hard, or am I being too, what I feel like is if you push
I think I tend to agree.
Yeah, my thought is you push on it so hard, you'll never be able to fix it. And there'll be a cascade of distrust. Now, I don't know if I'm buying my own BS, right? Do you think that could be the case? Or do you think no one actually really thinks about it or cares?
I'm sure, just like there's the Federalist Society is blamed for being the one that thinks about this in terms of like quote unquote pro-liberty circles, which maybe there's a sliver of truth there from a standpoint of they are thinking about outcomes down the road, but probably not. Probably more so in a way that's like trying to herd cats than in a way that's trying to herd sheep, where they're not going to go the direction you want actually. Yeah. And I'm sure there's some amount of that has to go on, like, in the California Attorney General's office, where they're trying to think about how this plays out in their favor. But I feel like if they're doing an honest analysis, right, if they're paying that close of attention, they'd find some other button to push, where it's like double banning assault weapons or something, or you're copying this federal legislation where they're trying to ban all gas operated guns, and then you define gas operated as everything semi-automatic except for bizarre operating mechanisms that don't actually exist.
Right.
Like,
but that will if you force us to develop them.
Right. So they'd probably be better off pushing in that direction if they were trying to trigger a knee-jerk reaction from a court saying like, oh, look, Donald Trump court bad. Meanwhile, like, carry of handguns is something that's like, especially past 10 years, but like, if you look past 30 years ago, banning handguns was a popular position, right? If like most
it had been for a long time.
Most of America was in favor of an outright ban on handgun possession. It was more popular than an assault weapons ban. Yep. Meanwhile, today it's pretty much flipped the other way around. But then the assault weapons banning is a lot less popular with younger people, which is strange because we're promised that the lockdown, the school lockdown, age group is they're gonna want gun control bans. David Hogg told me so. He said that
in the 30s, the handgun ban was more popular than machine gun regulation.
Yes.
So it is interesting. It's super, super fascinating to watch these trends go. And it's also interesting because one of the main reasons people are now, so against handgun control is like COVID made people finally perceive and grapple with the fact that they are ultimately responsible for their own safety, right? But the funny thing is, and this California judge, he put his opinion in terms of what such dangerous times we live in. The funny thing is we actually don't. Like, we're living in one of the safest times in American history ever. Like, there's a tiny uptick, right, of violent crime, but it's actually super safe.
And of course, the numbers that were published for this year that I've seen is that we're going to have the biggest year to year, so 1 year to the one consecutive year span drop in the number of homicides. Of course, that was all inflated because 2022 tailing off the end of the pandemic and everybody having been locked down for so long just wanted to shoot each other.
Yeah, and we all had our murders stored up.
Then come 2023, everybody got the murders out of their system, and that declined almost expectedly.
Yeah.
Rather steeply.
Yeah. But it's just an interesting point. And I, just to pontificate on that, I think it's because the information cost, right? The cost of sharing information has gone down so incredibly much that one, mild dangers are now much more public and perceptible, so that people want to guard against them, right? Which is not a bad thing. But also, two, just how deeply and fundamentally retarded our government and social services are, and public services are, is now on display.
Yes.
Whereas I don't think they've ever not been retarded. I think they've always been ineffective, right? Because when you call the cops, what do? They send a guy who didn't get very good grades with a gun. And so the results are natural. But now more of these things are recorded and talked about openly. So it's a fascinating way our society is growing, right? We're more aware now, I think, just how stupid we are. And so we're now more interested in guarding against just how much stupider our neighbor might be,
right,
than us, which I just love. I think it's fantastic.
I think another aspect of that is that, in times that were much more dangerous than in the times we live in today, the fact that information had such a high cost meant that you had in the old booze runner era, right? The St. Valentine's Day massacre got massive publicity, despite the fact that it wasn't, in the terms of gangland shootings for then, it wasn't that noteworthy, right? It was just the fact that it was so publicized that people were like, we have to do something about it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, come today, the cost of information is so cheap. You've got helmet cam video of atrocities happening in Ukraine and Israel and stuff, and it's also there and in your face, that I think it forces people to come to terms more personally from a standpoint of, what if that were to happen to me or here? Right. And of course, there's some aspect of that that's fallacious, right? Where I don't think that we're going to have a paraglider attack in the U.S. And then I don't think that Hamas is coming across the Mexican border by the millions to carry out an attack here. Even if
I was watching PragerU, and
even if they claimed they were, I wouldn't believe them.
Yeah.
But certainly, to some extent, some of that is fallacious, right? It's you being scared because something scary happened, but the actual risk to you is zero, probably. But people still sort of perceive that as the risk is low, but never zero, I should say. Right. And so that that causes people to come to terms where I think I don't know that we'd covered any of the stories specifically, but there was a couple stories where it was like Jewish people in New York who'd always loved gun control saw what happened on that October 7th, and then they were like, "Oh, I should have a gun." And so it's a sort of a bizarre thing where it's people are, and I guess best summed up by people are creatures of emotion. And I think it wouldn't be wrong, and we could probably dive deep into this like an hour just talking about this, but I think the Overton windows that exist around gun control and what's acceptable and what, quote unquote, what 90% of Americans agree is common sense is almost entirely emotionally driven. And that it's there at the margins where you can fight on stuff that's actually rational, where it's like, yeah, no, a ban on this doesn't make any sense versus a ban on that might actually make some sense. I don't think any bans, especially on hardware, make any sense whatsoever. Personally,
no, we need to ban software. No more thoughts.
Yeah, no more thoughts. You can't think about guns.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, I did it again.
Oh, God, stop. No, stop.
Stop thinking about machining long recoil with today's technology.
Stop. But
it must be easier. It has to be easier.
There's a company that's making a short recoil. I think it was short recoil AR-10s. And I was sitting there looking at it like, I'm going to make a modern Model 8. I need to do it. Because I guess that's a thought. Look, very interesting tangent. Not really interesting to me, not to you guys, because you're losers. Yeah, but I had been looking at one point in time at like a do-it-yourself or AR-15 upper where you just use like a metal tube for the upper. Because if you go and look at Stoner's original designs, right, that's where it came from. Like if you ever looked at like the AR-10 or AR-15's upper, it's like, that whole upper is sort of just like a tube that the bolt rides in, and then you go, oh, because those prototypes were literally just a tube. Because originally it wasn't hinged, blah, blah, blah. I guess you can go and read up on that on your own if you're interested. But sort of the idea I had was, I sat there looking at it and it's like, well, I'd have to cut a notch for a cam pin, up there at the front of the tube if I wanted it to be able to, work like a normal AR-15. And I sat there like, but I could just make the barrel reciprocate into the upper and have it get all the way to the end of travel. And then can just cam over because now the bolt carrier's out of the tube. And it was just like one of those thoughts, and I mocked it up in CAD, and I was like, I see no reason this wouldn't work, and then sort of abandon it because that would be conceptually it's probably possible.
Conceptually, it's possible. Practically, you wind up having to make funny cams.
Right. I'm not putting that developmental work into it, but
yeah,
I think you could pull it off.
Good.
Long recoil AR-10-ish.
Now I want it. Anyway, speaking of things that you guys all want, guys, go to MAF Corporation, maf-arms.com. There's a bunch of good things available. And with promotional code Fudd Busters, that's FUDD Busters, you're going to get a big old bustin' discount. And let me show you guys a new product that's available on MAF Corporation. It's under merch where there's clothing. Wow, look at the Trigger Confidence shirt. This goes into some of the stuff we've been talking about recently on Twitter. Like, you need to show people that you are always ready for something to go down. And
the rule says, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. The way I read that, the way that my legal mind analyzes that statute is, if you're ready to shoot, that hook better be on that booger. I think that's how the saying goes.
Yeah, you better hook your booger if you're going to shoot.
Better pick that boogie.
Yeah, shooting time. Look at these models that Pew did. Oh, that's good. But yeah, guys, MAF Corp shirts, wind chimes, and other sundries available for sale. Buy.
Do it now.
Buy. All right, next up, this story gave me a big ol' hap. It made me happy because it was funny. So this is a New Mexican gun control group faces investigation over gun buyback.
This one's probably story of the week. We really buried it this time. This one's been a roller coaster, of a story.
Yeah.
I think it technically started unfolding at the beginning of December. Really, it was on the 9th. I thought maybe this anti-gun group, New Mexico, I don't prevent gun violence or something.
New Mexicans to prevent gun violence.
Sure, that one. They've existed for a long time, and they do the usual.
Wait, hold on, before you get into the details, before we get into that, I want to say they should be allowed to do what they're doing.
Yes, I mean,
from a principle perspective.
From a principle perspective, I don't think that what they are doing or have done should be illegal. I don't think any of the things that they've done should.
So now go ahead. Go ahead now.
So they're one of these groups of. I've referred to them in the past as moms commit felonies, because what they do is they hold like these gun buyback events. And sometimes they're sanctioned where like there's cops there, and from a standpoint of custody of the gun, the cops take custody of the gun until it's destroyed, or take custody of the gun to destroy it, so as to avoid any sort of like, are people transferring firearms or people in the business of transferring firearms? Because even if you're not doing it expressly for financial gain, there can still be some questions as to whether or not a license is required. And so this group has been doing this for several years now. And like I said, sometimes with police sanctioning, sometimes not. Now, and I think it was December 9th of this year, they had a buyback event scheduled with the police, and the police pulled out on them last moment. So no longer police sanctioned. However, they had gotten contact information for some of the people who'd signed up for it, and they went door to door to these people's houses to cut up their guns for them. Right. Which is somewhat questionable from a standpoint of...
And the thing you have to remember there is that New Mexico is one of those places with
a universal background check law, which the owner, the president of this gun control group was proud to admit they helped author. They helped author New Mexico's universal background check law. However, they then went door to door to collect firearms and were insisting the whole time, oh, we destroyed the firearms on premises. However, New Mexico's gun control law only lets you take possession of firearms without a background check if you're a cop, if you're giving it to a cop, or if you're doing gunsmithing, right? So you take possession of the gun, and then your possession of the gun is sort of conditioned on you give it back once you've done something with it. However, they took these guns and then put a single saw cut through them in varying places and then didn't give them back.
Right.
And they themselves did the cutting, right? It's not like they brought the saw and said, you guys use this saw, cut up your gun and give us the destroyed firearm. Because that, it brings up two issues, right? The first being they probably didn't actually destroy these to the point that they're not firearms anymore. From a standpoint of, would the guns work the way they sit? No. Could they be readily restored, which is the thing the ATF freaks out about?
But some of them would still work the way they sat.
Right. And so that's sort of like...
And don't say the R word. It's not... wait, no, it is the R word, but only in a certain context. But
right. So it's sort of like this ball of spiders from a standpoint of, like, once you peel off the next layer of spiders, you get to, well, some of the guns that they put a single saw cut through probably weren't actually destroyed. Now, what they did with these guns once they quote unquote destroyed them, some of these guns ended up being brought across state lines, including handguns and potentially machine guns that they admitted to doing this with, where they gave them to a group in another state that would turn them into a garden tools or instruments or whatever, right? They're doing like display art with these things. However, some of these guns, and I think they may have also crossed state lines, but they brought them to school zones, including the frames of revolvers that had not been cut at all, gave them to school children who are minors that can't legally take possession. I guess not from an FFL, they can't take possession. I don't know if it was either in New Mexico or Colorado. I'm not sure if either has an under 21 handgun ban thing, but they gave them to school children on school grounds for the kids to weld together and make like anti-gun art with or whatever. Right. The problem is this is just like a laundry list. It's a laundry list of felonies they've either committed or potentially committed or allegedly committed or what have you. So they've done a big...
Look at the xylophone, which has a complete AK front end. So it's...
Right. And so this brings up several issues. So in the past, when groups, I think even this group or groups like it have done this, people always bring out that infographic from the ATF where the ATF says that guns need to have 2 or more torch cuts, and it has to be like an oxyacetylene torch, and it has to be cut in these places, and it has to. Now,
this is that thing that got taken to the school.
Right.
Our students are making a 6-string guitar from our dismantled guns. That's just a bunch of complete revolvers.
So the bottom right one is a complete revolver frame. Yeah. There's no cuts on the frame whatsoever. And then the one on the top left there has 2 cuts, but it's 2 cuts through the front grip strap of the revolver. Yeah. You could put a cylinder in there and it would still fire.
Yep.
And so
God knows on these H&Rs down here.
Like if you or I were selling those revolvers with those cuts like those on Gunbroker or whatever and calling them like 80% revolver kit rewelds, ATF would be mad. They'd be really mad about what you were doing.
Yeah.
And then but if it's built different, like different with a capital D for Democrat, then you can take these guns to a school zone, give them to children and have them play with them. And that's okay. So the next sort of issue that you deal with here is that the sheriff in this place that canceled the gun buyback event is now investigating them, and he's investigating them specifically for the violations of New Mexico's universal background check provisions, where they're allowed to take delivery of the firearms. Yes, they're allowed to take possession of the firearms from a gunsmithing standpoint, but you have to give the gun back at the end of gunsmithing. You can't take possession of somebody's gun, destroy it, and then the gun's chain of custody ends, because the law would stipulate there's a transfer that occurred to the person who destroyed it first.
Yeah, they want to know where the gun terminated.
Correct. So there's a very interesting question there. But I guess back on the question of the ATF's guidelines for destruction.
Well, the ATF guidelines of destruction, though, that's not law. Really existed, right? So, and if I were the lawyer for this company, right, and it was a question of whether they were federally handling firearms, I would say that they absolutely were not. And I think you'd have a really good place to argue that. That said, it shows just how stupid and overdrawn the laws are.
Yes.
That a group that's clearly intending to destroy guns may, and like there's a non-insane argument. There's a
ways.
What?
I was just saying, like, this group who's like intending to destroy guns could run afoul of the law in like 15 different pitfalls.
Yes. And there's a non-insane argument that they're doing it, is the thing.
Right.
Like the argument that they are committing felonies could hold water in court. It could.
And personally, I think they should be prosecuted for this, because you should show your enemies the same mercy they'd show you. They would love to see you get raided at 4 a.m, have your doors kicked down, have you ripped away from your family, and then drugged through the courts for years at your own huge personal expense. If you were to have an AR-15, right? It's something as simple as you have an AR-15. They'd love to see you like shot in the street for that. They hate you. You shouldn't show them any more compassion. I don't necessarily think it's noble to say they shouldn't be prosecuted because law bad. I think they should be prosecuted to show them how bad the law that they tried to have forced on other people really is. However, I don't hope that they see consequences for it. I hope that they get a good lawyer who's able to get the law that these guys worked so hard to get passed struck down. That, to me, was what would happen in a world where cool stuff happens.
Yeah, I never wish the force of like the cumbrous and expensive machinery of the government against anyone, no matter how funny or ironic it would be. And I'm a person who does a lot of stuff just for funny. But one thing I would like to say, this guy, the Ferrari, the Sheriff Ferrari, seems like a nice guy. Definitely not playing with a stacked deck. I am requesting funding for our own gun buster. Firearms pulverizer. Just so.
I guess on that point, just because I do want to correct that, there was a lot of people who were saying, pointing to these ATF guidelines of torch cut, quarter-inch material, 3 places or more, and it's in these places, and it has to be. Those are guidelines that the ATF publishes because they've got this question a million times, right? It's one of their most frequently asked questions: is how do I make a gun stop being a gun? And they haven't done an APA published rule on this. So any guidelines that they give are guidelines, and it's not technically legally binding. However, they don't want to be in a situation where they told someone wrong. So they're going
to overdo it.
Right. They're going to publish the most aggressive interpretation that they think people are going to actually be able to follow, which is you cut the living shit out of the gun.
Right.
What the statute actually requires is that it's not readily restorable. And if you go and look at the large number of AK parts kits that have been imported into the country, for the longest time they were saw cut receivers that had all the receiver sections, and then the ATF changed their minds from a standpoint of import because the import restrictions are a little bit more stringent than the domestic definitions of destroyed. So it's sort of an apples to oranges comparison.
But let me tell you about readily restored.
Right.
So that the first time readily restored was used and what it was designed for was for guns that were built as firearms and then so they'd be built as a firearm at the factory, and then lead would be poured down the barrel, and they'd say, "Look, I made a starter pistol."
Right.
And so the theory there was it was a gun. It was intended to be a gun. Then they did something funny, right? And it very easily you make it back a gun. Over the intervening decades, they've gotten more and more aggressive with that, of course. But the simple fact is, the law doesn't lay out a guideline for destruction because that's not how English law generally works.
Right.
They define the thing. If the thing is destroyed, it's no longer a thing. And there's barely ever situations where you have to define whether it's destroyed or not, because in any rational system, disintegration, right, making so like something that's integral, one piece, making it no longer one piece, it's destroyed. It doesn't work anymore. That's always been enough. People have gotten really confused by going to these guidelines, and the guidelines that are published that are easiest to find are the ones that they use against importers,
right,
when they're trying to bring in machine gun parts kits. And the thing about that is, we're not talking about an individual cutting up a gun, like, you know, say, oh, I don't want to own this anymore or whatever. We're talking about people who are subject to a whole different set of rules, because they don't have to grant your import permit. It's a lot more discretionary. And that's why there are different like rules on the import side, and where it, you know, they will get very angry at you if you don't jump 3 backflips or whatever. So it's, if you think that you know, right, oh, a firearm's not destroyed until it does, you know, this and that, your position on the Dunning-Kruger curve might be like further left than you originally thought.
Right. Like a single saw cut absolutely can destroy a firearm using the federal definition of firearm. It's entirely possible. Yeah. And in fact, there's a large number of parts kits being sold currently. You can just go out and buy that are single saw cut, you know, AK receivers or what have you.
Which were approved for importation by ATF at one point. And then conversely, there's also people like Tate Adamiak who were
ATF changes their mind
without publishing anything. So again, just another point that of just how deeply stupid this is.
Right, like it shouldn't take a 20-minute discussion to hash out what does a destroyed gun mean. Well, go ahead and pull up a chair. This is going to be a long one. When did this happen? Why did this happen? And how did this happen?
Yeah. Did I destroy this gun? And then the answer to that question is, it depends. How much is in your legal budget?
What time is it?
Yeah. What time is it? And who's your lawyer? Anyway, so after this last ad read, I know we usually end on the Patriot Patch, but guys, don't go anywhere. One, you should always stay for the Patriot Patch ad read. Two, we're going to be doing the This Year in Guns rundown right after Patriot Patch ad read. So guys, Patriot Patch Company, these are custom designed patches, apparel, and accessories for any freedom-loving individual, and they are officially the longest time supporter of This Week in Guns. They supported this show before I was even born, you know, back when the show was run by another person. So guys, it's patriotpatch.co and use promotional code TWIG10, that's TWIG10, to get a nice fat discount. They got great patches. Look at these. Take a look at some of these pop culture ones. And the Dangerous to Go Alone collection, love it. Home Defense, love it. It's good stuff, guys. Everything a growing boy needs. What is that, a Model 10 and a Twinkie?
Yeah, something like that. That's a revolver.
Revolver. Patriotpatch.co. Go give them $1. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So I'd also just like to thank the disabled people of Reddit for compiling all of this information for me so that I could then recompile it as an aggregator. 2023. Ivan, you got this pulled up?
I should pull it up.
All right, so let's go bullet point by bullet point. I'll start with state legislation, then you can take over at federal, all right?
All right.
Okay, so we're starting at the top. State legislation. In 2023, laws were put into place in Illinois, Hawaii, Colorado, and Washington to allow lawsuits against the gun industry. Basically, these were the species of public nuisance lawsuits that were designed to get around the PLCAA. And we are seeing these get fought out at horrible expense to private industry, which is nightmarish. So not great. Permitless carry, effective in Alabama, Florida, and Nebraska. There's now 27 states. We are in the majority. Nebraska got state preemption. North Carolina's pistol purchase permit requirement was repealed, overriding the governor's veto. That North Carolina's pistol purchase permit requirement was designed specifically to prevent black people from buying handguns. And finally we're like, okay, we admit it.
And the governor was like, why is that bad though? Oh.
California, Delaware, Hawaii, and Maryland had all passed Bruen response bills. All but Delaware's got all held up by the courts up to now. Michigan and Minnesota got universal background checks. Colorado, Vermont, and Washington got waiting periods. Colorado, Connecticut, and Oregon put laws in place prohibiting ghost guns, aka cool guns for men. The following states created, instituted, or expanded red flag laws: Michigan, Minnesota, Colorado, Vermont, bringing the total red flag carriers to roughly 22. Colorado and Connecticut raised the age to buy firearms at all to 21, while Colorado's was blocked by a preliminary injunction. Illinois got an assault weapon and 50 cal ban in January and has required registration of existing firearms with a deadline of 1st January 2024. 99.4% of Illinois FOID card owners have not registered a firearm yet. Washington got an assault weapon ban. Total states with assault weapon bans is now about 10. California added an 11% tax on guns and ammo. Tennessee held a special legislative session. That was our Governor Bill Lee, called in response to a notable school event to enact a red flag law. That did not happen. Instead, they passed sales tax breaks on gun safes and locks, which benefited nobody. New York got an ammo background check along with state police becoming the next point of contact and adding fees for background checks. The point of contact thing is concerning, guys, because then the state gets to sit there and go on all of your transactions. So not good, not good. And Mass considered a massive anti-gun bill that eviscerated the right to keep and bear arms, but was tabled until the next solar cycle. Ivan with federal.
That brings us to our federal stuff. So the federal year was interesting. There was a lot of Biden shenanigans with the ATF. He was doing the Trump bump stock maneuver over and over again. So first on this list is the pistol brace rule, which became effective in January and has been struck down, and at this point seems like ground into dust is sort of the fate that it's facing, where there's multiple different injunctions. Of course, I think they're all pretty much in the one. I think that they're just in the same one circuit for now, isn't it? It's just in the Fifth Circuit. That's right. There was the one with Wisconsin circuit or whatever. And so there's it's having a bad time, and the opinions that have been written about it are pretty darning.
Getting pooped on.
And probably we won't see much more movement on them until we have an answer.
My one, and I'm hoping for an actual Second Amendment one on ours, which that's what the oral arguments were about. So that is the movement there, really.
And certainly by the time these cases do get to the merits, I guess unless a preliminary injunction holds out and then the state, the government just drops it, which would be, I think that would be bad if like in a potential headcanon inventioning a timeline, if Trump wins and then he gets to the ATF to back off and like the preliminary injunction just like stays and then the government like backs out of the lawsuit, they're like, actually, no, we don't care. We admit they're right. and then there isn't a ruling on Second Amendment grounds, I think a massive tactical mistake will have been made at every step along the way. It would be bad if we didn't get a Second Amendment ruling out of the pistol brace thing, because that's like that seems
very
like
fertile ground. It's very
right. It seems like we should be able to get NFA.
It's a massive unforced error,
right.
And we need to take advantage of it. So
right. So hopefully there's still
we're
more
working on it.
Right.
Yeah. But so that was the pistol brace thing.
The ATF had that pistol brace no cost registration amnesty, and then the thing that'll make this case very interesting is the fact that with that injunction in place, what does that mean? Nobody knows, right? This is one of those things where like there isn't case law that tells you what to do in here that I'm at all aware of, where the government waives a tax that they decided they could waive because of a rule they passed, and then they put a time period on their waiving of that tax, and then their ability to do that was enjoined.
Yeah, I have a very, very fun idea for later down the road, but
it's just like at this point, it's like there's stories that I've read anyway of like how law worked at the time of the original 13 colonies, where they just made shit up constantly. They're just inventing ideas out of nowhere, right? Because they didn't really have a lot of case law to go off of. So they just like invent legal doctrines out of nowhere, and judges are just like, I don't know, it sounds interesting. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. And
so we'll probably have a similar sort of a thing, like assuming ATF doesn't just like cede this, or assuming it on Second Amendment grounds, it's not just like the registry as it pertains to SBRs goes away forever. So we'll have to see. It'll be interesting. Another ATF shenanigan, and this one wasn't directed by Biden, and in fact was relying on the bump stock rule more than anything. The whole first reset trigger thing happened, where the ATF wanted to go and collect them and tried to declare that they were machine guns, and then there was a bunch of confused lawsuits and like corporate structuring, skullduggery going on. Oh, it's a fascinating story, and maybe something
force reset triggers.
Right, force reset triggers. It'd be interesting to have a video on just them at one point.
Yeah, we do need to finish our. I do need to finish editing our video on the deep dive into Mr. Triggerman's website.
Triggerman as well.
Yeah,
and there is a Mr. Triggerman 2.
Yeah, there is.
There is a Mr. Triggerman 2. Yeah, and perhaps one day we can deep dive on like what all's happened with force reset triggers, because it is an interesting. It's
an interesting thing, but there's a lot more clickbaitery than there is actual movement there.
Yes, it's certainly a lot of clickbaitery, but yeah, ATF tried to make that all happen, and it seems like the Fifth Circuit is like doing an injunction, but then it's a sneaky injunction. I guess you can catch up on that from a different video.
Yeah,
but that's a thing that had happened this year. This is an interesting one they added to the list. President Biden called for an assault weapons ban about 300 times. That's probably about accurate. And then every time he mentions like F-15s and cannons, that you can't own an F-15 cannon in the military in the Second Amendment. Nope.
Right. No. Yeah. And then of course they mentioned the Hunter Biden, which I'm sick of talking about.
And I guess absent from this list is the ATF framer receiver rule, which I guess went into effect last year, but is still being battled out this year.
Yes. And and largely being ground into dust as well.
Right. And it's interesting because I guess Tom Grieve had made a video this week about a prior court case where they had found that AR-15 lower receivers weren't firearms, was the conclusion the court came to. And that was sort of, ATF used that as their impetus for why they have to make the framer receiver rule happen. And I don't disagree with what they're saying from a standpoint of the definition, the textual definition of frame and receiver is fundamentally unworkable for guns that have two-part receivers like the AR-15.
Well, mind you, hold on. Mind you, there is no definition in the law of frame and receiver. So this is we're talking about the regulatory definition that they very hastily bojangled back in the 60s and 70s. And it's very clear when they wrote the definition of frame and receiver that they were staring at a revolver.
Right.
And a
revolver and a bolt action rifle.
Very perfectly describes those.
Right.
The revolvers and bolt action rifles, and very terribly describes everything else.
Right. And so it's sort of fundamentally unworkable. And I think there was a prior time they tried this, like they had a rule put together and proposed it, but maybe they didn't publish the final one, where they had tried in the past to fix this, but I think their proposed definition was also unworkable. But they had an opportunity here, especially under Biden, to actually, all that they would touch, all they'd touch is sort of expand and clarify that like guns that have two-part receivers, it's either the upper receiver or lower receiver or front or back receiver or however else the receiver just put. They just clear, and I mean the way that they clarified it,
you know what? It would have been fine.
Right. Like, the way that they clarified it in this rule, I don't agree that they should have the power to do this, because I think the APA is like atrocious, and the federal government doesn't have that power in its executive branch. However, if they were to have done this, I doubt it. I think you'd have 2 votes on the Supreme Court. By the time it made it to the Supreme Court, I think you'd have 2 votes that the ATF overstepped their bounds, and everybody else would be like, yeah, the ATF's able to do this.
Right.
However, the ATF didn't just write a thing that said that with guns with split receivers, it's where the bolt goes. It's where the bolt comes into battery, which frankly is like the most sane way that they could have written that. I think that the new way they wrote it in this rule was pretty sane. However, thanks to good old President Biden, he had them include language that would then let them ban unfinished frames and receivers, which was sort
specifically, and then and also in the original draft attempted to like muddy the waters so intensely.
And AR bolts maybe, and
the original draft was literally a firearm can have multiple
frames receivers at once, right?
Yeah,
like for a handgun, it's the slide and the frame.
It's strictly countertextual, which is like the only thing the government can do, allegedly consistent with the APA, is clarify the law.
Right.
Which means you like actually can't make it worse the way they did. So yeah, that was a big old mess, which again is ongoing. So now let's go on to court actions, and this is not a very complete list, but let's go down it. Illinois Supreme Court found the assault weapon ban lawful so far. No, it's that they didn't preliminarily strike it down. So
this is the Illinois Supreme Court. So this is the state Supreme Court, and they had the law in front of them on like procedural questions. Yeah. And then it was funny because they're like, yes, this was procedurally suspect, and yes, we're the ones who said that we were going to stop we were the ones who said that we were going to step in if the state legislatures keep doing procedurally suspect stuff, but we're not doing it here. Have a nice day. And two of the justices on the Illinois State Supreme Court who did not recuse themselves had each received like $1 million from the governor, who was a named plaintiff on this case.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, so then Supreme Court, we had oral arguments in Rahimi, which is about domestic violence restraining orders. It was a rough one, but it's very clear that case is not going to go well for Rahimi as a defendant. It's not clear what all of the implications are going to be of that case. It's certainly going to be a landscape shifter.
Yes.
Maryland's handgun qualification licensing law was struck down. Thank God. And thanks to Maryland shall issue, official pro-gun group of This Week in Guns. Oregon's omnibus anti-gun 114 measure was declared unconstitutional. California's law banning any firearms advertising that might be attractive to minors, which also forced all of the websites on the internet that have ever thought about a gun to ask if you're 18. Right. Was put on hold.
And I guess there's one more footnote there as far as court actions, because like the Illinois State Supreme Court challenge was like the longest of long shots at best. It's more of a long shot than getting the Supreme Court to step in on an emergency basis, which is, last time we touched on the Illinois assault weapons ban, that's where we were, was they were asking them for an emergency appeal and it wasn't going to happen. And maybe Nagar is going to do another appeal, which will be an actual appeal of the injunction itself and not on an emergency interlocutory basis. We'll see how that goes. But then back in the district court,
right,
one of the plaintiff groups had asked for the registration requirement of the law to be enjoined for vagueness. And the judge sort of gave a very wishy-washy opinion denying the motion to enjoin it for vagueness, because he's like, it's not unconstitutionally vague, even if it is vague. And I was reading that like, because the biggest issue for me there is that much like the ATF defines the things that are in the law,
right,
or federal gun laws, the Illinois version of that is called JCAR, and JCAR has yet to actually publish a final rule defining what the terms in the assault weapons ban mean. So they haven't defined threaded barrel. They haven't defined flash hider or flash suppressor or barrel shroud. None of these things actually are defined. And so the judge was sort of relying on you'd look at the dictionary definition of these terms. However, I think in my opinion, I think that still becomes unconstitutionally vague if you just consider barrels, because what they mean and what the dictionary definition of a threaded barrel is completely at ends with each other. Right. And I think in an unworkable way.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear when they say threaded barrel, they mean the business end is
right. They mean a threaded muzzle. But the law doesn't say threaded muzzle.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
The common English vernacular definition of threaded barrel is a barrel with splines on it somewhere,
including maybe outside,
front or back.
Rifling is a pitch thread that's very weirdly square with a radius root cut.
Yeah.
Is that a threaded barrel? Is anything rifled a threaded barrel? I don't know. And the problem is the law doesn't clarify, and JCAR hasn't clarified yet. Right. So that creates a big problem. And this federal judge, and this was the same judge who gave us the injunction in the first place, so he at least understands the issues. And he was saying that he would like this same challenge brought back before him once the thing goes into effect, so that way there's, I guess, like actually damage is demonstrated or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he also gave some sort of head nod to, almost all of the sheriffs in the county have said that they aren't going to enforce this anyway. Mm-hmm. And so he said that maybe creates standing issues. And then the other sort of issue it creates is if pretty much all of the sheriffs in the county are sort of already on notice that, hey, there's like aspects of this law that are unworkable. I guess the judge is sort of anticipating if he makes this dog whistle, the state police probably won't do anything about it, at least until the final rule is published. Then if the final rule is published and the definitions that they give are then still vague, I think maybe this judge would be more willing to listen to an argument on the vagueness, as well as, once this case gets back in front of him on the merits, it's back to the Second Amendment arguments again. And so he's going to have to try and make it comport with some of the things that the circuit court said, but it doesn't have to comport with all of them. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, this law banned handguns, and the circuit court pretended like they didn't hear a single argument about handguns, which is an interesting thing.
Yep. All right. Let's move on now to the miscellaneous. I'll kind of go for half, and you can take the rest.
Yep.
Remington Firearms has closed up its Ilion, New York shop and moved its headquarters to Gorga. We had high-profile notables in that's Maine, right?
Yes.
In Maine, Serbia, Allen, Texas, Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee, Monterey Park, California, Antioch, Utah, Goshen, California, Orange County, California, Philadelphia, Nigeria, Prague, the Czech Republic, Plateau, also Nigeria, Guanajuato, Mexico, San Vicente, Mexico, Esmeraldas, Colombia, Hamburg, Germany. Notice not all of those were here. And those are only the ones that were allowed to be reported on. Then after that, the New Mexico governor banned guns due to the health emergency. The courts, it wasn't banned guns. You Redditors need to make my job easier. Courts have blocked most of it, along with her own law enforcement refusing to enforce it. Some sources estimating now 500 million guns in the hands of U.S. people, which is still not enough. Gun control aids massive. Oh, I'm not reading that. That's nonsense. You go ahead. You go ahead.
This totally real and worthy of serious consideration bullet point is gun control aids.
No, I don't want to. Fine. You want to read that? That's nonsense. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Gun control aids a massive body count in Hamas's surprise terrorist attack on Israel on October 7th. This is something I think we may have even talked about on the show.
Yeah,
where the differences in gun laws, apples to oranges between countries, is difficult to make, as well as like, you know, what amounts to a military incursion, right? It's not like this was like a mass shooter event. It was, and it's not like Hamas's soldiers that they went in with were people who didn't know what they were doing, because they also attacked Israeli military bases where there certainly wasn't gun control preventing the Israeli soldiers from having guns, and they killed a lot of them. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's not like these were a bunch of like hooligans who were out to like make a name for themselves, because they had like they didn't have like long hair and play Halo and then get mad at the world and then go and lash out. They had other reasons for lashing out and were, you know, trained to some extent, right? They even blew up a tank, which was kind of a weird thing. Yeah. So it's difficult to say that gun control was to blame there.
Yeah, it's just kind of contrived.
To me, contrived is the exact word I was going for. There was like, come on, like, I understand that you want everything that happens in the world to be a gun control argument, but just like at the beginning of the whole Russia-Ukraine war, the fact that they were handing guns out to the citizens sort of like implies that, look, that would be, you know, and perhaps like strictly in the US, it makes sense. It's like an argument where like, hey, look, now they realize that the Second Amendment is kind of important. But from a standpoint of, did their lack of a Second Amendment contribute to their being invaded? No, probably
definitely not.
Probably.
And also, it's like they also aren't now getting gun rights. They're being told, take this weapon and go where we tell you, or we'll kill you too.
Right. So it's much more like the Second Amendment. And people, I guess, misunderstand this about the U.S. as well, where being called up for militia service wasn't like, oh, I get to go and do boog stuff with my best buds. It was, you're a conscript, and if you say no, then bad things happen to you.
You up.
You've been conscripted. It's different.
Like impressed. It's when they go on your boat and say, look at my muscles. Get on my boat.
And sort of a similar thing, you know, goes on in Israel. What they've got sort of compulsory military service, and then they've got people who carry around guns, but they can't carry them loaded because I guess they're all cops deep down, and they have funny things happen when they carry them loaded. So that's the whole thing, and why I think that it's such an apples to oranges thing that if I was making this list, I wouldn't have included it.
Yeah.
Anyway, our next bullet point here is a Liberty Safe handed over access codes to police just because they asked nicely. That was a very interesting debacle.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Oh, and here's another good one. A friend of mine recently, you remember how we were talking on the show that if thieves wanted to, they'll just take the whole safe. They'll just walk out with the whole safe, and they'll actually be in and out quicker and with more guns than if you had them just piled up around the house as a sane person would.
Right.
I had a friend that happened to. They just walked in and stole his gun safe.
Did they bring a little dolly?
Yeah, I assume I didn't get the details, but he was like, hey, you know that thing you said on the show? That happened. And I was like, fuck, that is very unfortunate.
We should stop giving such good advice.
Yeah, we're just telegraphing to the criminals, bring a dolly. I guess next up, we've got California Governor Gavin Newsom's called for a constitutional convention to eliminate the Second Amendment. Personally, I'm still massively in favor of this constitutional convention. Let's do it.
No, we totally want to vote for that thing. That's what we want to do.
For the Second Amendment one, to get rid of that.
Balanced budget.
Balanced budget term limits.
Balanced budget term limits.
Make the term limits.
What are you doing?
And make the term limits 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We need elections constantly.
Your terms are measured in hours.
So it should be like jury service. That's what it should be. Just all elected positions is like jury service. Like you're called up and it's like, yeah, it's gonna suck, but your job's like legally required to continue to pay you while you go and be a ledges lizard for a while, and you'll have no idea what you're doing, and you'll just say yes or no, and it'll be a better disaster than we've got now.
Yeah, I will.
Next up, we've got the chief executives in the U.S., Massachusetts, and North Carolina created offices of gun violence prevention. So sort of I think we may have covered the federal one.
We covered the federal one.
Sort of what they're doing here is, it's not, people were trying to say that this is like a
propaganda ministries. That's all it is. Right.
People were trying to say like, oh, this is like they're creating an EPA for gun control. Not exactly, because it's not going to be an executive agency that's tasked with like interpreting laws or anything. It's essentially, like Matt was saying, it's a propaganda agency, right? So they'll put out a report every year where it's like, our research indicates 1,000% of AR owners have a tiny PP in their stinky doo-doo heads. And then the gun control groups will be like, look, the federal government said it, so it's true. And that'll sort of be the extent of it. They'll do like little research programs and put out ads where it's like, guns are bad. Okay. Personally,
thanks, Jim.
I would like to live in the reality where the next president that becomes a president takes the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and he uses it to extol the virtues of the Draco.
Draco.
Where it's like, if you don't want to get shot, buy a Draco. Buy two, one for each hand, and dual wield them. Learn how to dual wield them. Get training. Go to a Travis Haley class and dual wield Dracos and just if they tell you to go home, you're the one with the two Dracos.
Say no. Just say no. That's it.
Just say no and turn towards him and look like one of those kids with the bad haircut who played too much Halo.
Yeah.
Let's see. Gun control group in Colorado. Here, the number 4, the kids, all one word, held a multiple day protest and demanded Democratic governors issue executive orders banning all guns and require buybacks.
And this had a big result.
It went nowhere. It did get quite a bit of media presence, and I think this is the gun control group that whenever they first started, they just had a list of guns they wanted completely banned and bought back, and I shit you not. I really wish this is, I hope this is archived somewhere. I shit you not, the list of guns that they wanted banned was all of the guns that you could have in Call of Duty 4.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was just the list of guns from Call of Duty, like the STG 44.
Yeah.
And like the PTRS 41. Why do you know that exists? And you keep going through this list and it's like, wait, this is just literally every gun that's been in the past 10 Call of Duties.
Yeah.
Oh. That's where they got it from.
So funny.
Like they want the AUG H-bar banned. Huh?
Specifically the H-bar. Yeah.
Are you sure? And so, yeah, they got all of their gun facts, like any sensible person, from Call of Duty.
Carl on duty.
The last bullet point here is familiar. It's the New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Buyback did their own buyback, and they broke any number of laws. It's somewhere between like one and a lot.
One and yeah.
And then I guess the other funniest thing about that story, right? A little footnote on that story. Throughout the whole time of the director of this group being told, hey, it's more than speculative that you broke these laws. It's probably closer to certain you broke these laws, at least one of them. They've been tweeting through the whole thing like, it's the old drill tweet where it's like, you keep tweeting, I am not owned as you shrink into a corn cob. This lady's just been tweeting, I did not break the law. I did not break the law, as she shifts into a woman in an orange jumpsuit. It's been fantastic where she's like, oh no, I didn't break the law. And then she had one tweet where she was like, I've never transferred firearms to a kid at a school. And then people responded to her with a picture of a kid in a school holding the gun that she transferred them. And then she deleted the tweet and then blocked a bunch of people. No idea what that was about. But I assume if this lady had a lawyer, the lawyer would have showed up at her house and taken all of her electronics from her.
Yeah.
Stop. You need to not do that. Deleting the tweet where you say I didn't do a crime whenever people point out the crime that you did doesn't look good.
It looked different.
All right, and I think that's our little list of 2023 year in review, brought to you by Clearly Insane One on Reddit.
Yeah,
go and check out Clearly Insane One for more lists of stuff.
Yeah, more editorialized lists of things. But yeah, guys, so that's all there is to it. We will be, of course, back at you with the usual. Things might be a little slow for the next week or two. I'm getting married, and it's the new year, and we've got some deadlines coming up in cases that I'm working on. So it's going to be a nightmare. But you guys do want to make sure you get subscribed to the Fudd Busters channel, because season 2 is coming, baby.
And it's going to be more laughs and more excitements and more guns. And we're going to take like all of the feedback that people have given that was like honest, actual feedback that wasn't just people going, no, but I paid $5,000. No, please. I think we're going to incorporate pretty much all of that. Like, I think probably the biggest one is people want to see guns that we'd like. And it's not, I mean, we don't want to go into it being like, this is a gun I like, and here's why.
Right.
But there will be guns that prospectively will have more positive things to say about them than I paid $3,000 for a gun that has a jam nut to hold his ugly ass muzzle brake on.
Yeah. No, and there will be guns that we like that are still bad, and guns that we like because they're good.
And something in between.
But there will also be more of the same. So you guys stay tuned for that.
I think you'll be in for a real treat.
All right. As always, guys, we will see you next time.